Hello, friends, and welcome back to Freakish Fridays. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I've got 4 true Bigfoot encounter stories submitted by viewers. I found these personal experiences both fascinating and compelling, and I think you will too. So grab your boots and let's ride to Sasquatch country. Number 1. Dear TB, I grew up on an Indian reservation here in Oklahoma. I am Cherokee. Our home was by a massive cave system and in the middle of 2 hills. There is a cave on the property that everyone on the reservation knows Sasquatch exists. It's common knowledge where we come from. We would know their moods just by the sounds they made. When he was upset, you would know it because his anger would be heard throughout the whole reservation. People would talk about it in casual conversation. For instance, did you hear Sasquatch upset last night, etc. My grandparents told me not to fear him because they had a pact with him and he wouldn't harm us. All was good until more Sasquatch came. These were evil ones, not the same as the Sasquatch that had always been there. He had been run off from the territory, we believe. I had to walk down a long dirt road to get to my school bus. They would chase me up in the woods, whooping and throwing rocks at me. I was terrified, and I got a feeling that they wanted to hurt me. It kept getting worse, and I refused to even walk to school after that. At night, when my cousins would come over, we would all play outside in the front yard. These new Sasquatch would gather around in the hills with their glowing red eyes and watch us. I know if our parents would have not been out there, they would have taken us and harmed us. I could just feel it. I could sense their body and their bad intentions. I told my family that they were bad. My uncle didn't listen. He went for a walk alone to the water, which was like 1.5 miles from his house. He was an avid swimmer. No wounds, just a mysterious death, but I know they killed him. He was the first of many unknown mysterious deaths that started to occur by the water. In that area, the person was always alone. It was always a mystery, and I'm glad I stuck with my gut feelings because they were getting more aggressive every day that I walked to school. I believe my instincts saved my life to this day. They are still killing people in the area. The person is always alone, and the death is always a mystery, but I know, and so do the other people on the reservation. Always follow your instincts. I'll send you more stories at a later date. Thank you for reading. Signed, Carrie. Number 2. Hey, Biker. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania and have spent most of my life here. I've been hiking all over the state at least once a week, every week, since I began driving at 16. But all across the many state parks, I've spent thousands of hours hiking in the woods. I've had 3 strange encounters now since the summer of 2022, almost as if a door has been opened since the first one. The story I'm sharing today is the most recent thing that happened to me and my 2 buddies last Saturday night. It completely traumatized me. My 2 lifelong friends and I went on a spur-of-the-moment night hike last Saturday night. I haven't hiked at night for nearly 2 years, and I used to hike alone all the time, but hiking with these 2 guys made us all feel bold. We were hiking near the part of the Appalachian Trail where we grew up in Buchanan, and the AT runs through the town. There's a ridge next to town with a very popular hiking vista called Hawk Rock. At the base of the mountain, there's a creek that flows into the Susquehanna River, and a road that follows this creek back into the woods for about 1.5 miles. It leads to a Boy Scout camp shelter and water wells, follows the creek around a bend, and then it ends where the road ends. We have a low-key camping site that follows an easy-to-miss trail that continues past the road and goes into the woods another couple of hundred of yards. We're about 2.5 miles from the car. We're just sitting there, talking about Sasquatch and encounters. Both of my friends have never had an encounter. This night was totally dark with no moon. We couldn't see each other side by side without a flashlight, and it was dead quiet. In hindsight, it seems weird. There's normally lots of frogs along that creek. I've been at this campsite about 24 times and never had anything happen to us there. We're just talking about missing 411 and my 2 previous encounters. One friend has never heard the Sierra sounds, and my other friend told me not to play them. I made 2 tree knocks, and then we played the Sierra sounds in total darkness. As if on cue, not even a minute passed by, and a huge rock splashed into the creek, about 30 yards away from the direction of our trail and our only way out. I was already on my feet. I've thrown many rocks into creeks, rivers, and lakes, and that rock was large. It made that whoop sound of breaking the water and then crashing into the creek bed. Immediately, we felt that sense of dread and danger. Then it happened a second and a third time, back to back. I said we needed to get out of there, right now. We were 100% sober, and I've been up and down that creek by kayak, trail, and fishing. It's one of the few areas in Pennsylvania that doesn't have beavers. I've never seen a beaver or signs of beaver anywhere along that creek. I've heard beaver tail slaps, and it didn't sound like that at all. It was loud and scared the crap out of us. It was so close to us that it didn't seem just like a coincidence. We packed our bags up and grabbed our hammocks in less than a minute and started walking out in the direction of these splashes. We got parallel to where it happened maybe 30 seconds later. The creek was 4 or 5 feet to our left, and there was a fog over the creek. We couldn't see the other side, but there was nothing over there but woods. Then it happened a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th time. Loud splashes of large rocks crashing into the water right next to us. I was on point, and we were going through this trail with the brush to our right and the creek to our left. We weren't speaking to each other. We stuck together and were only focused on getting out. We got back to the road, and we were practically jogging back toward the car. We were saying that it was weird and too close and too conveniently timed. We continued down this road and got a mile away from where it happened. The road was maybe 50 feet from the creek now, and a little higher up, but still parallel to the creek, and completely silent. So quiet you could literally hear a pin drop. We began to feel like we were all okay now. But then it happened again. A large, loud splash in the creek below was perfectly parallel to us. The sense of danger was palpable, and we could feel it all around us. Something was on the other side of the creek, mirroring us. The problem was there were no trails, no houses, nothing but woods over there. Whatever it was over there was keeping pace with us silently, without light or without a trail, and we could feel it. We got to the end of the road, and 2 kids were walking in with lights. We saw them coming. I said to my friends, we have to tell them what just happened. We can't just let these kids go in there without warning. We told them what happened, and all of us were clearly shaken and rattled. We got into the car and drove back to my buddy's place in town. For 3 solid hours, we tried to rationalize and reason what it was. You couldn't think of any animal that checks all the boxes of the behavior. It was as if somebody was messing with us, but they were in the middle of nowhere without a light, throwing large rocks and moving silently without a trail. If it was an animal, we would have heard it moving. If it was something in the water, we would have heard it displacing water while moving. I know this area like the back of my hand. I'm terrified to go back outside again, and afraid as soon as the sun goes down. We all felt like we were lucky to just get out of there. I was excited about spring and summer and to get back out hiking again, but I'm terrified now at the thought of it. I just needed to share because I think people need to know what's out there. Thanks. Signed, Joe. Number 3. Hey biker, I'm from South Florida, and my mom, her brother, and 2 uncles swear by this story. One of my uncles doesn't even like talking about it, so here it goes. My mom was a freshman in high school and living in Jupiter Farms, Florida. My grandma had to work that day and asked her 2 brothers to come to watch my mom and uncle. My uncle was about 4 years younger and had Down syndrome, so the extra help was needed. For dinner, my mom's uncles were grilling on the porch when they heard a horrible noise in the distance. They were never able to describe this noise other than saying that it wasn't human and not an animal. My mom had 2 dogs who immediately took off barking and running in the direction of the sound. A few seconds later, they were running back to my mom's house, shaking in fear. My mom said that everyone looked in the direction the dogs had just come from and saw this massive being coming out from the woods. They said it was about 7 feet tall and wider than a door frame. They immediately went inside and locked all the doors, grabbed the guns, turned the lights off, and sat together in the living room. My uncle, who has Down syndrome, was visibly shaken and upset. My mom went to get a board game from her room to help calm him down, and while she was in her room, she decided to peek out of her window to see if the creature was still there. She says that when she opened the window, the creature was standing directly in front of it, just staring in. My mom says she screamed bloody murder, and my uncles came running in and were frozen in fear. One of them yanked my mom by the arm, and they slammed the door behind them and huddled in the living room. My grandma came home from work a few hours later to them all crouching together in fear. It's been over 20 years since this happened, and my mom and her uncles swear by the story. My mom says to this day that she'll never forget the face of Bigfoot and will get really upset when people tell her she's lying. She says she knows it's crazy, and she didn't believe in it either, but she saw it, and there's no denying it. One time, my dad was dropping my mom off at home after a date, and as they were talking outside her house, a row of trees began shaking violently as if someone was trying to tear them down. My mom immediately ran inside, and my dad took off to his car. Thanks for reading. Signed, Samantha. Number 4. Hey, Tattooed Biker. I have a story for you. You see, my dad in 1978 was a Portland, Oregon policeman for 30 years. And once a year, I went with him while he did his police work for a book report at school or something. I was around 12. He worked on the graveyard shift, coming home at 4 a.m. in the morning, about 7 miles north of Hubbard, Oregon. We lived down a gravel road, about 1 mile from the school. It was all gravel, but it was long enough for 2 cars to go past each other. And we were just, half asleep but still awake. He and I both saw something leap across the road as if it had already been running. It jumped onto the whole road, which was at least 10 feet wide. It didn't even step into the middle. It jumped off the edge of the ditch and right into the orchard next to where we lived. I looked at my dad, and he looked back at me. He was a very quiet man, but we just said, "What was all that about?" We got to the house and parked the car in the driveway, and we were both running, trying to get through the door as fast as we could. When I went to bed that night, I felt like it was morning because I was so anxious. I told my sister that we're moving my bunk beds to the far wall, as far from the window as possible. Afterward, I didn't talk to anyone except my mom, and I didn't have any close friends, and school was out, but then it happened again. A week later, a doctor in his small red Volkswagen drove down the same road toward town. He saw the same thing and was so scared that he stopped at the local police station. Of course, that got out and it was written up in the paper and all that. It looked just like the Patterson one from the film, except that it had lighter hair. Anyway, thanks for reading my story. Signed, Pete. Dear Tattooed Biker, I have a story that I've actually shared before, but I'm not sure the channel used it, so I hope that's okay. Anyway, this story takes place in Pleasant Hills, Pennsylvania, Allegheny County, south of Pittsburgh. I grew up there and had a friend who lived about 1.5 miles away from me. We didn't drive back then due to poor decision-making, so we had to walk everywhere. I'd walk down and past the local borough building, cut up through the woods, and come out on the other side. It was a shortcut to bypass the huge hills we'd have to walk up. The beginning of the hill started in Pleasant Kingdom, a playground for kids that sits back off the road in the woods with tennis courts, basketball, and typical ground stuff. We used to sled there because the hill was pretty massive on the back side, and that hill led to the opening of our shortcut. We were walking to my house one night, and we were almost clear of the woods. It was pitch black, but we could see the playground lights at the bottom, about 100 yards away, when we heard a disgusting sound to our right. It sounded like something was eating something else and making crazy wild animal noises, but with a human undertone. I could hear the tree limbs shaking, but couldn't see anything. We bolted the last 100 yards downhill to the bottom and scratched our heads. We had no idea what could have been out there, although it might have been a bear. We weren't into Bigfoot back then, so it never crossed our minds. The only light was coming from the parking lot lights. It was me and my friends, Steve and Jose. Jose was good at fist fighting, and we were basically afraid of nothing, especially when we were together. We were just about to turn the corner to walk up the path behind the borough building to my street, and for whatever reason, we all looked over our shoulders. Steve said, "What is that?" We all saw it walk across the pavilion, upright from left to right, and then hide behind a tree. It was maybe 100 yards away up the hill in the dark, but the light from the parking lot illuminated it enough that we could see a tall, gray-colored animal man walk across the pavilion. Its head was level with the pavilion roof, so easily 8 foot tall. We just stood and watched, and then it simply peeked out from behind a tree, as if to get its eyes on all of us. At that moment, we all turned and ran as fast as we could to my house. We stopped short and looked at each other and asked, "Why are we running?" It's like it telepathically jumped into all our minds and said, "Boo," and made 38-year-old men turn and run like babies without even knowing what we had just seen. None of us knew what it was, but it bothered us for weeks until one day, Steve said, "I think I know what we saw," and said Bigfoot. It clicked immediately, and I knew right there and then that I wasn't crazy, and that we had definitely seen and heard a Sasquatch. I could tell people in my family, friends, and nobody believed us, but it affected me enough that I would join the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society. I would eventually go on investigations and interview witnesses of reports, take pictures, and walk to the sites. I have a lot of pictures still from some of the interviews I was on. I came to realize that Pleasant Hills is built on abandoned coal mines, and to find out that they travel the mines to stay out of sight. Pleasant Hills is not a rural area. There are houses and neighborhoods everywhere, but there are large woods between the towns that separate each other. This is the main reason people had a hard time believing my story. I know what we saw. Steve and I are still very much into Sasquatch. Thanks for reading. Signed, Tyler. And there it is. 5 true Bigfoot encounter stories. What do you think about these encounters? As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And if you've ever had a brush with the unexplained, or maybe seen something that you just can't identify, send your story to the email in the description, and your experience may just make it into a future video. So thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.